Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free. Imagine having your weekly shopping cart filled for you and your meals for the week decided on. Taking all of that work off my plate is why I love Hungryroot. Fall is in full swing, and between work, family, and everything else on my calendar, I'm trying to make life a little simpler. That's why I turn to Hungryroot. Hungryroot takes the stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, and a wide grocery selection, it's easy to find options that fit your whole family's tastes and nutrition goals. Last week, I had their yuzu baked salmon with asparagus, and it was absolutely delicious, light, flavorful, and ready in minutes. I didn't have to think, plan, or run out of ingredients. Hungryroot just knows what works for me and helps me eat well, even when life gets busy. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg and use code Dr. Meg. That's hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg. Code Dr. Meg to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/Dr. Meg. Code Dr. Meg.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Wherever you go, whatever they get into, from chill time to everyday adventures, protect your dog from parasites with Credelio Quattro. For full safety information, side effects, and warnings, visit CredeliaQuattroLabel.com. Consult your vet or call 1-888-545-5973. Ask your vet for Credelio Quattro and visit QuattroDog.com.
On today's episode of Parenting Great Kids.
For the first time, Leland Vittert opens up about growing up on the autism spectrum, the challenges he faced, and the unwavering support that helped shape the man behind the headlines.
The quote-unquote fame that comes with being on TV, it's just never been about that for me. I want to really try and make a difference that, hey, the hard work you put in really makes a difference in a kid's life.
Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. Here's your host, Dr. Meg Meeker.
Leland, thanks so much for coming on my podcast today.
Pleasure. Nice to be with you. Thanks for the interest.
Yeah. So, Born Lucky. In the book, you open up about something that you've never shared publicly and which I dare say is going to be a surprise to a lot of your viewers, that you grew up on the autism spectrum. Why did you decide to tell your story about it now?
Well, for most of my life, all of my life, it was not ever something I talked about because, as my father decided early on and taught me, you don't want to be defined by a diagnosis. And the easiest way not to be defined by it is not to tell anyone about it. Mm-hmm. The purpose of this book is a fewfold. One is to provide hope to parents. 20 million or so kids are diagnosed with ADHD, autism, some form of developmental behavioral disorders. Zillions more have problems with bullying and physical disabilities and not fitting in and having a tough time growing up. And then their parents are left to really be hopeless. Mm-hmm. This book provides hope that the hard work, the dedication, the struggle really pays off and really is worth it. That's number one. Number two, it's proof to kids, either if they read it or their parents tell them about it, that high school isn't real life and middle school isn't real life, which really needs to be believed because it's true. And I go through some of the stories in the book of what I went through in high school and the bullying and the isolation, versus life now. And the third thing, and I think you and I, you as a physician, I'd have an interesting conversation about this, is the cost of a diagnosis. Because so often, and certainly when I was younger, all everybody talked about was the benefits of diagnosis. You got more time on tests, maybe you got medication, you got special treatment. And there's never really a discussion about the cost of a diagnosis to a kid, of labeling a kid, of telling them they're different, of setting lower expectations. And I think lastly, and I talk about the stories in the book of my struggles, not only socially, but also physically, and everything else, but also how rowing and how my dad throwing me in the deep end of the lake, so to speak, or the deep end of the pool, and that adversity and those challenges and facing it and doing hard things has served me so well later in life. And kids who have a diagnosis have an excuse not to have to persevere through real difficulty and challenges. And that's just not the way the real world is.
Yeah. I love it, because what I've seen is exactly that over the years, that if boys in particular are labeled early on in life, first, second grade, maybe not with being on the autism spectrum or ADHD, but other things like a learning issue, or they're very clumsy, they'll never do this, and it sticks with them. But one of the problems I see is that a lot of times a label, makes their parents feel sorry for them, and they use it as an excuse to not do well, to not be held accountable, to not be responsible, particularly kids like ADHD. I also feel strongly that those on the spectrum are seen negatively. In other words, if somebody says, well, my child has Asperger's, therefore he can't this and he can't that and he can't that. But you don't hear the positive side of it. That is, many people on the spectrum are extremely smart. The people who are real go-getters and achieve great things in life have autism. So talk about your experience of how you were perceived by friends when they found out, or they didn't know you had the diagnosis when you were going. Okay.
No, my parents didn't even tell me until
Really?
until I was in college, I think, or even a little bit after that. So my dad always could tell that I had really sort of a complete inability to interact with people my own age. And in the book, there's the stories of, my dad watching somebody in line at a movie, another little kid bump into me and me turn around and hit him because any touch to me was seen as super aggressive. Me trying to play soccer at like a little pickup soccer game with a bunch of 8-year-olds and unable to do it. My dad turning to my mom and saying, boy, we've got a real problem here because Lucky just can't interact with any kids. The story when I was in 4th or 5th grade that the bullying was so bad that my dad came to visit me at school one day to find that the PE teacher had me go play with the girls, because I would have such a hard time with the boys. So you can imagine my father walking to see his kid at PE and the PE teacher going, oh yeah, he's down over there. He's with all the girls. So it was very clear that I had all these problems. To your point, though, my dad said, I'm not going to adapt the world to Lucky. I'm going to work to adapt Lucky. That was my nickname, still is, to the world.
So I'm thinking about your age and your dad. Early on, did he think you were just different, or did he know that you were on the spectrum, or how did he sort of figure out
great question.
Where you fit?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, 1986, there was a lot less knowledge than there is right now. What happened was over time, and there's a couple of stories in the books about this, about when my mom would leave me in a little preschool class and she would come back, I wouldn't acknowledge her. I'd go sit on the teacher's lap to sort of punish her for leaving me. And teachers said, hey, look, we think he has a problem. We think he has a problem. And they took me to be evaluated, one of a couple of evaluations. And basically what happened in one of them, and we tell this story in the book, that the two sides of the IQ test, normally a 20-point spread, indicates some kind of learning disabilities. I had about an 85-point spread. So I was genius on part of the test and mentally retarded on others. And the woman at the time said to my parents, it's very difficult to know what's going on in this little boy's head. And there was a lot of discussion of, do we give him a diagnosis and on and on? And my dad said, absolutely not. But the question my dad asked to the woman who did the test, the child psychologist, was, is there anything I can do? Is there any hope at all? Anything? And the woman said, generally not, but there's two things that need to be there if Lucky is going to have a normal life and learn to interact with kids his own age and socially. One is that he has to be smart. And the second is that he has to want it. He has to understand and be told that he's different and he doesn't get it. And the social weirdnesses, I used to carry around in fourth grade big engineering books and books about aeronautics and civil engineering because I found it fascinating. Obviously, at recess, that doesn't really do well to fit in your kids. So it had to be explained to me. And so that's what my dad embarked on doing, sort of teaching me that my instincts were wrong. And here's how to, by examples, try and learn social interaction.
Did you have this sense as you were growing up that he was trying to change you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So
it was very clear. And I think, people will debate, and that's fine, whether this is, sort of the way to do things. But there was never a you do you, right? My dad supported me to no end. He was at the driveway every day when I would come home to sort of put me back together again from the bullying and the horribleness of school. But it was always made clear that, like, if you want a normal life, this is how you have to act. And the way you think to act isn't necessarily right. So we're going to help mold you and teach it.
Mm-hmm. So even as a young child, I'm trying to think of what that would feel like for a parent to approach you and say, the way you are needs to be different. And psychologically, what did that do to you?
Look, my dad and I have had and still have this just incredibly close and loving relationship. I still call him every night to say goodnight. And we're talking 3 PM. I've talked to him 3 or 4 times today. So I trusted him. And actually up in northern Michigan one summer when I was like 5 or 6 years old, he put me up on a tree. And if you imagine like a big, tall oak tree with sort of at his shoulder height, so 5 feet off the ground, was a notch. And he put me up on the tree. And he looked at me and I looked down at him and he looked up at me and he said, do you trust me? And I said, of course I trust you, Dad. He goes, jump into my arms. And he caught me. And he said, I will always catch you. And that kind of is what this story encapsulates, right? Is I had to trust him that my instincts as a little boy were wrong and that he could teach me how to interact, how to understand the social dynamic, how to protect me as I was being bullied. I mean, there was a time at school, we tell this story where an art teacher in 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade, I think 8th grade, in front of the whole class, told me, he said, if my dog was as ugly as you, I'd shave its ass and make it walk backwards. So think about saying that to a kid.
That your teacher said that. Did your dad find out?
Oh yeah. I mean, I walked home that night, that afternoon, and he saw me at the end of the driveway, and he said, "What was it like today?" And I said, "I was just humiliated," and sobbed for hours. But he made me go to school the next day, and he made me go to art class the next day.
Did he? Okay. Did he confront the teacher?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the teacher apologized and everything else. Because, when you're in school, you can't really live that down. And if the teachers do it, then the kids think it's okay.
Exactly.
I guess my point is that it was very apparent to me, and he made clear, like, there's a reason people are treating you like this. Part of it's because of how you act, and part of it's because of your values. We're not going to change your values, but we are going to help you learn how to change how you're acting so that you can have this happy and fulfilled life.
Mm-hmm. He was tough on you. I mean, putting you up in a tree and saying, jump and trust me. Okay. But he made you do other things like push-ups to make you tougher.
It was a lot of things. It was about setting goals and achieving them and doing hard things. He's always been a huge fan of setting really high, hard goals and then working like hell to achieve them. So it taught me at an early age accountability. Mm-hmm. And this wasn't, he wasn't standing there over me with a whip saying, do push-ups, but he was saying, okay, if you do 200 push-ups or 150 push-ups a day, 5 days a week for 3 months, you get X.
Okay.
With my mom, it was, whatever. Normally it wasn't a thing. It was always an experience. And that was his way of teaching me about setting goals and achieving goals. And I think more importantly about doing really hard things. Mm-hmm. Because when you do really hard things as a kid, as you grow up, you realize I can do hard things. Yeah. And it's going to be a struggle. And life isn't easy, but it pays off later.
Well, absolutely. And I think that anybody who's successful at anything, you with your job, relationships, anything, has to work extremely hard and fall down a whole lot of times. And I think that's hard for a lot of parents today to let their children experience. They want to, just make sure their grades are great. They don't have to work too hard. And then they go up and they grow up and they go to Harvard and they help them get in and so forth. So what you're talking about is going to make a number of parents, particularly mothers in the audience, wince. And our sense is that we sort of teach parents, or parents learn, this is who your child is. Embrace them, love them, accept them, and don't try to change them. Your father said, this is who my son is, but I'm going to push with all my might to help normalize him, I guess, or help him to fit into a social system, ecosystem where he can really thrive and be successful. So it really feels very counterintuitive as a parent.
Yeah, I think it's certainly counter-narrative, right?
Yes.
In counter to the collective wisdom right now. And that's part of this story. And I think there's a lot of parents who want to hear that they can make a difference, right? They want to hear that they can help their kid because a diagnosis doesn't have to define you. And that's sort of the lesson of this book, that my parents were given a choice early on. Either we can let the diagnosis define them or not. There was a principal who said to my mom and dad, it was like 7th or 8th grade, who said, everybody here at this school thinks Lucky is quite weird. And then she followed up, and I do too. So she was right. I was a weird kid. There's no parsing that. I think this is a story, though, to your point, of a father saying, I can help mold him and I can push him to be, I think, better. I know people wince at that word too, but the weirdnesses were not embraced. How about that? And parts that he could mold of me that he saw that would help me in the real world were really highlighted and rewarded.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What does it feel like? How do you, because those of us who don't have any form of autism have a really hard time understanding what it feels like to be a 10-year-old kid. I mean, put the bullying and everything aside, do you see the world differently? Clearly you have, auditory sensitivity. And, but when you're with a group of people, say you walk into a room, there are 5 people, different ages in the room. What does that experience feel like to you, and how do you see things? What's your perspective?
Now or when I was 10?
When you were 10?
Oh boy. I'm 42 now, so it was a while ago. I think what you're getting at is that when I was much younger, I really could get along very well with adults. And I tell this story in the book that I got along great with my dad's friends because I could talk about, at the time, the 1992 presidential race, Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush and Ross Perot. I could talk about Desert Storm and the war in Iraq. It was sort of like a party trick for this little kid who was like a mini adult. But part of the reason I was a mini adult was because my dad was my only friend. I didn't have kid friends to interact with. Look, by the time I was 10, I understood that however I acted was, I don't want to say repulsive because maybe, well, it's probably a good word, but it was almost like how, opposite ends of a magnet attract and the same end push people away or push the magnets away. That was me. And it just sort of like I would bounce off because I was that weird.
Mm-hmm.
And still to this day, look, there's times I talk too much. There's times I try too hard in a social setting. There's times I tell an extra joke that doesn't land and doesn't work. And I think, Jesus Christ, Lucky, you're better. Like, yeah. And that the instincts take over. And so what this process was where Dad was sort of teaching me that my instincts were wrong and that social interaction had to become for me like a learned skill. Mm-hmm. For so many people, it comes really, that EQ becomes really sort of as a natural skill. It comes very easily to people. For me, it's entirely a learned skill.
I can see that. And obviously not in you, but in kids that I see. One of the things that I see is that kids will feel very distant from other people, understanding how other people think, how other people feel. Empathy is something that can often be lacking in kids because it's like they live in this insular world and they can walk in a room and there's this sort of big bubble around them. And I feel sometimes they try to connect with other people, but it just doesn't work. And
absolutely,
when they're trying to connect with other people, do they know they're not connecting and something is wrong? Or do they feel like I'm normal and they don't even notice it?
Well, look, I knew something was wrong because all of the other kids had friends and got invited to birthday parties and everything else, and I didn't. We have my old report cards where, I think it was 4th grade, the teachers wrote, Leland Lucky would benefit from interacting with his peers outside of class. Well, the irony was I couldn't because no one invited me to do anything ever.
Yeah.
But so I knew it was me. And if I didn't know it was me, my parents made it really clear. This is about you. Now they said, we love you and you're wonderful. And the values that you have are going to make you successful later in life. But right now, things you do make it hard. And here's and I'll give you an example. My dad would take me, say, to a dinner with him and his friends, or if we were there with other families or whatever. And he would watch me. And my dad, consummate salesman, unbelievable sort of leader, fabulous EQ, the guy with, who 80 people will say is his best friend. And he would watch me. And if all of a sudden when I was talking or telling a story or whatever, he would just tap his watch. Yeah. And that was my signal to stop talking. And then later in the conversation, I'd start talking again, or he'd kind of nod at me, go, okay, you can. And I'd, okay, start talking again. And then later when we would get home, we'd post game, almost like watching film, right? And he would say, like, do you remember when you told that joke about whatever? Why don't you think anybody was listening? Or why do you think everybody started to ignore you? Or did you see that when you interrupted, Mr. So-and-so was trying to make a point about whatever? And I go, oh, I hadn't thought of it. Like, well, I wanted to talk about X. He goes, right, but you got to learn that when other people are, it was a taught skill.
Did you ever feel resentment towards your dad for the pardon me?
No.
No. Because I think of a lot of kids whose parents are constantly, no, move this way, tweak this, say things this way, might at some point go, stop it. Just stop it. But you never felt that way with your dad?
Oh, look, there were two things, and I'm trying to think about the best way to say this. No, there was never any resentment. Were there times I was just so hurt and so frustrated, I would scream at him for hours about, why are you making me go back to school? And why won't you fix this for me? And, why are people so awful to me? Yeah. And he would take it. I mean, I didn't know this until we started working on this project, that there were a lot of nights that he would listen to me cry for, a couple of hours, or scream at him for a couple of hours because I'd been bullied, and he would just take it. And then he would go into the living room after I went to sleep and he would start crying.
Oh,
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think, but I don't ever remember. I knew that all he wanted to do was help me. And, he was my best and only friend. And I think it's important to point out, he wasn't a slave driver about this. And I tell the story in the book that I was in 8th grade going into my 9th grade year, and I wanted to do something. I went on a hiking camping camp in British Columbia to go spend 3 weeks hiking. And then I got away from everybody that I already knew and got to start all over. And, my dad's like, look, you go do this. You don't quit. Because people in our family don't quit. Fine. And on the first hike, which was like a 5-day hike, there were these 2 really bad kids who threatened to throw me off the cliff.
Oh, gosh.
And I called my dad after we got into the little town, and this is before cell phones. So I call him and I said, I got to come home. And he goes, well, let's talk this out. You don't quit. These kids are mean, but, on and on and on. I said, this isn't that I want to quit. This is I'm scared.
Yeah.
And I said to him on the phone, and we tell the story in the book, I said, Dad, you're my best friend, and I need you. And with that, he said to the camp counselors, he's coming home right now.
Good. Yeah.
And they said, we can't do this. There's no refunds on it. I said, I don't care. And that night I was on a plane. So, it was, the trust was earned by him, that when he would tell me, like, you can do this, he knew I could do it. And I also knew that if I ever said this is what was going on, he would believe me. And he ended up believing me. There was a situation when I was in 5th grade where I was being bullied and I fought back, and the principal sort of had enough of me and they wanted to throw me out of the school. And the principal got the teacher to lie and say, your kid started the fight. And my dad asked me, and I said, no, I didn't. And he believed me, and he ended up figuring out what was going on and pulled me out of school because of it. So the trust went both ways.
Yeah. Fall is my favorite season. Apple orchards, warm soups, grandkids jumping in leaf piles. But let's be honest, it's also when life gets busy. Between back-to-school routines and holiday prep, cleaning my house was the one thing I just couldn't keep up with. And that's why I booked a cleaning with HomeAglow. It was such a gift. HomeAglow is a top-rated home service platform dedicated to making your space clean and tidy. With their easy online booking, I was able to schedule a background-checked cleaner in my area in just a few clicks. No stress, no time wasted. It felt so good walking into a clean, peaceful home, like I could finally breathe. Honestly, it's been great for my mental clarity and energy. And with their Forever Clean membership, I can book unlimited cleaning starting at just $19 an hour. Take home cleaning off your plate this fall by using HomeAglow. Head to homeaglow.com/Dr. Meg to get your first 3 hours of cleaning for only $19. That's HomeAglow.com/Dr. Meg. Thanks so much to HomeAglow for sponsoring this episode.
Don't put it down. Put it up. Way away, 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 away. Way away, away, away.
Music has such a powerful way of helping kids through life's ups and downs. That's exactly what 80 was created for, a new project designed by Emmy Award-winning composers J.P. Rendy and Kat Rao Rendy. What I love is how 80 makes kids feel like they have a musical friend who really gets them. The songs are fun, uplifting, and help with moments like staying on task, calming down, or navigating daily routines. And parents, you'll appreciate that these songs are created with input from child development specialists, so they're both joyful and supportive. The debut album, Nothing Rhymes with Orange, is available right now, and it's perfect timing since it launched during ADHD Awareness Month. Find the new album from 80, Nothing Rhymes with Orange, on your favorite music app, or click the link in the episode description to listen now. That's 80, AIDEE, your new musical sidekick for life's little ups and downs. Click the link in the episode description or listen now on your favorite music app.
Put it up. Way away, 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 away. Way away, away, away.
The Sarah Fraser Show. 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 Look, I promise you my show is not as annoying as this ad. Hi, I'm Sarah. I do a daily pop culture podcast. You didn't think I was going to do this ad and say my name over and over again. So you don't know what you're going to get when you tune into my show, but you will escape and you will have a good time. Maybe be inspired too on The Sarah Fraser Show. Tune in.
How did college go for you?
Interestingly enough, it was all right. I tell this story that he had always talked to me about how he had experienced some of the same issues and rejection, and told me sort of stories about him that he hoped I would understand that better things were ahead because he had done so well. And one of the stories he told me growing up was about how when he got to college his freshman year, he rushed the fraternities. And at the end of rush week, he was the only guy without a bid. Only one of 100, and I think it was 300 kids or something, 300 man, boys, whatever, who didn't get asked to join a single fraternity. And I tell this story in the book that at Northwestern, the exact same thing happened to me. So really cold January night at the end of rush week, I called them. And I was outside of the last house that I had tried to rush and get a bid from. And they said, "You're not getting a bid." And I called them and I said, "You know what, Dad, I'm just like you."
Oh, yeah.
And it was the first time there was an exact parallel. And I said to him on the phone that night, "You know, you've always told me it's about everyone else, that they just don't see the good qualities in you because the good qualities are hidden." And you know, he would always try to help me, look, this is how to unhide your good qualities, but you're good. And I said, I have to realize that this is me.
Yeah.
That there's some way that I act that people find difficult. And I had to wrestle with that and acknowledge that. And I think that was sort of the moment he had been working towards. And that was really a very poignant part of our experience together.
So maybe you were his best friend too.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think I think we have an enduring friendship.
Mhm. Was there a point in college, after college, where you really things began to click, and you were finally getting, okay, this is how I socialize with people, this is how I smile, this is how I make eye contact? Was there a point where it became second nature to you, or do you always have to fight with it?
I always have to fight with it. It's gotten a lot easier, right?
Mhm.
The sort of the habits, you can break down bad habits and build good habits. But sure, I mean, there's times that I still revert back. Look, I think at a point in early in my career, um, endless hard work was starting to pay off.
Mhm.
I tell the story in the book, and my dad told it to me 1,000 times when he was younger. As he started his first company, he had made 106 unsuccessful sales calls and almost closed the company. And it was the 106 sales call that saved what was the business he was starting, and led to some great successes for him. And the lesson to me was, you just grind.
Yes, guy.
And that you just outwork everyone. And that paid off for me in rowing. And it paid off for me in the beginnings of my career, where I would just outwork everyone. And that started to be valued.
Mhm.
And that sort of proved what Dad had always told me, that the values that make you, the values that make you have a hard time in high school, are not the values of life.
Yeah.
And the values of life that will make you successful later are the ones you have. And that was the first time I really saw that come to fruition.
Mhm. It's really, I mean, your life story is really extraordinary. And I have to say, it's quite the opposite of what I see in the young men who are on the spectrum. I think that there is, and I really want you to speak to this, there's a belief among teachers, parents, psychologists, anybody, that if you're neurodiverse and your brain is wired differently, you can't change that. You can tweak a little here and there, but it's not something that you can really, I don't want to say overhaul, but that you can really change. I mean, because I do think there's brain changes that probably have happened to you along the way as your father helped to rechange your brain. Talk to the parent out there who has an 8-year-old, a 14-year-old who is on the spectrum, and they really believe that there's nothing they can do.
Well, I'm proof you can do things.
Mhm.
So, and this isn't a prescription. I wrote this book not as a cure or a diagnosis or a prescription or the Leland Vittert method or the Mark Vittert method to curing autism or any of that. I wrote it because I think parents need hope that they really can make a difference, and that everyday struggle that they're going through to help give their child a chance at a better life really pays off. So I'm proof that you can make a difference. You can mold a kid. You can show them by example, and that it's working. It's getting through. And I think that, there are days that my dad thought, I'm not making a difference at all. Like this, he thought he was just banging his head against a very hard concrete wall for a long time, but he wasn't going to give up. And I think, so I would never suppose to give any parent advice, but I think the concept that, letting every kid, you be you, that was not how I was raised.
Yeah.
And I think it turned out pretty well.
And yet, your dad could almost see inside of your head and your heart and say, okay, this is sort of cracked and this is kind of broken, but we're going to take the best of who you are and we're going to build and build and build it so that the cracks kind of just fall away a little bit. You don't notice them that much. And I think that, because honestly and truly, I've never read a story like yours before. And I was thrilled because as a pediatrician for a long time, I've really never met a parent or a teacher, psychologist who says, yeah, let's go at this because we really can help this kid. There's a sense that, well, this is their fate. And so that's why, your story is really extraordinary because you are teaching parents that the impossible that they feel is the impossible actually can get done. Where was your mother in all this?
Always there. My dad wrote the afterword to this, and he said the unsung hero in this is my wife, Carol, because not only did she have to, hold Lucky and put him together, but hold him, meaning my dad. And they've been married for 53 years, 54 years. We take the reader through their first couple dates, and after 3 dates, they were engaged. And look, I'm lucky in so many ways, right? And lucky that my parents have this magical marriage that is unlike most kids with disabilities. 80% of kids with autism, their parents get divorced.
Yeah.
So it's a testament to them. And I have never heard that it caused difficulties in their marriage, but I can just imagine the stress it caused.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I wanted to tell this book about my dad versus about my parents because the relationship he and I had, I think, proves what you're getting at, that you really can help mold and change and really champion a kid in a way that I had to tell it through his and my relationship.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, I don't think I've ever met a parent like your father. And people are going to read and go, oh, I would give anything if I had a father like that. Let's say you're 35. We'll back up your life a little bit. And you had a, quote, normal life of a child who's on the spectrum. But, nobody really intervened. Everybody just thought, well, this is who you are. Would it have been too late for you to have seen change in your life? I mean, if your father started to work with you when you're 35, would he still have been able to make those improvements, do you think? I mean, can adults with Asperger's on the spectrum, can they change?
I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I appreciate that you have that much faith in me. But this is just my story. And I don't have that kind of expertise to get into.
Well, it's interesting because, there are a lot in the generation, your generation who fell through the cracks.
Yeah.
Because, doctors didn't diagnose it. They didn't know what was happening. School teachers didn't know what was happening. And now we're taught to help kids from the get-go, diagnose early, help them early intervention. But there's a whole generation of kids that never had the intervention. And we're saying, well, what now?
I think it's a great, it's a great question. And it's tragic, right?
It is.
And when I was diagnosed, I wasn't diagnosed with autism because back in 1986, and you would know this as a pediatrician, that autism was seen as basically what we now would call profound autism, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So they didn't really know what to call it, but they knew that they could give it a diagnosis. I think there was something called perceptive. We hate.
PDD.
Yeah. There were a few different versions of what they said that I had. Pervasive developmental disorder,
Correct. Yes.
social blindness, and all these other kinds of terms. And obviously profound learning disabilities. You have that big of a spread on the IQ test. But I never got a diagnosis of a learning disability. My dad said, look, in real life, you're not going to be given extra time on tests. Mm-hmm. So you're not getting extra time now.
Yep.
Now, he had the ability to have me have tutors and to, obviously my mom sat at home and worked with me on homework and on and on and on. But when it came to the standard was the standard. And that was always really important in our family, that you didn't take accommodations, you didn't get extra time, you didn't get any of those things, because in real life you wouldn't, and you got to learn now how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. You have a very public job today. Millions of people see you on television and would be blown away to hear this story, which is going to be great. I'd love to be, in a room where a whole bunch of people read your story and go, wow. Why did you choose a job that was so public and that might give you a lot of personal and psychological challenges?
It's a great question. The job kind of chose me. It was junior year in high school. I wanted to stay in St. Louis rather than go up to my parents' summer house. And I needed a job. And a friend of a friend of a friend had one time, their dad had said, hey, if you ever need an internship, give me a call. And he was a radio host. And I kind of threw myself into it and kind of to the point of setting goals. The next summer, my dad said, well, what are you doing next summer? And what are you doing the summer after that? And in the sort of the journalism route grew out of that. I often think, and I talk about this guy, Charlie Brennan, in the book, who his big advice to me after I'd worked for him for a summer at KMOX in St. Louis, the radio station, was go practice your craft, go get on air. If he had been a surgeon, I probably would have thought about going to med school. I'm not sure I could have gotten in. I don't think academically I could have. But, if he had been a investment banker, probably would have gone to, it was more about, I got into something that hard work helped and I could sort of reasonably do. And then it just became about setting the next goal and the next goal and the next goal.
Well, and clearly, you probably can't see it, but those of us looking at me outside, this seems like this is your fit. This is your lane. This is what you were meant to do.
Oh, you never watched my audition tapes when I was younger. How about that?
Those would be fun. No, but you know what I mean? You just sort of seem like, well, this is the way you're just supposed to host a show, or this is the way you're supposed to report and so forth. And it just seems so natural that this is why I think the book is going to be fabulous for people. What are your biggest hopes and dreams for this book? I mean, aside from selling millions of copies, I'm sure the book is going to do extremely well. Yeah. But what are your personal hopes for the book?
This is about helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad has always been insistent in anything I do. When I was a little kid, we talk about setting some goals in terms of flying. I learned to fly when I was 8, 9, 10, 11. And at the time, young kids who were flying got a lot of publicity. Mm-hmm. And he said, you can go do this and I will help you do it. And even though I would throw up every day, he kept allowing me to do it. He didn't want me to, but he kept allowing me to. Had a great relationship with this fellow by the name of Stan Mick, who was sort of the most influential man in my early childhood other than my father. And he said, you can do all this and you can be the youngest kid to fly from St. Louis to Paris, but there will be no publicity because achievement is about achievement, not about public recognition. And that was an important lesson. I think it's why I'm sort of still so shy about being recognized in sort of the quote unquote fame that comes with being on TV. It's just never been about that for me. It's always been about the achievement.
Yeah.
My hope for this book, and the reason Dad sort of allowed it to be written, and I guess I could have done it on my own, but that he said, I think he got behind it, was what we started with, was providing hope to parents that, hey, what you're going through now, the hard work you put in really makes a difference in a kid's life. And that whole idea that you start out with, well, Leland's just Leland and he's going to be him. That may work for a lot of people. And I don't propose to tell anyone how to raise their kids or a prescription for life. But for parents who say, I want to really try and make a difference and I want to try to mold my kid as best that I can and support them and take on that burden to help them exist in life as it is, I think my goal is to provide them the hope that that this really does make a difference.
Mm-hmm. It sounds to me like the book has been extremely important to you. I mean, I know that your journalism and everything is important to you, but I'm sure this is, in some ways, you can be more proud of what you're doing here than professionally, even though this is professional. You know what I mean? Because your heart and soul is here.
Well, it's been a journey, and I never went to therapy. Kids nowadays, all kids and my friends who have kids, all of them are in therapy, and on and on and on. Maybe great. That wasn't what we did. My dad, I guess, was my therapist, but I never went to therapy or saw anyone. And this has been like going to therapy, but doing it on national television.
It's a fun way to do it, I guess.
I heard something interesting, which was I thought that the really hard parts were going to be remembering all the times people were mean to me, right? The time that a high school bully organized it so nobody in the whole school would talk to me because he was upset that something had happened with his girlfriend. There was the time that the teacher said, if my dog looked like you, I'd shave its ass and make it walk backwards. The being rejected at all the fraternities, all those kinds of incidents. And what I found was that I was the most emotional about the people who were really good to me and the adults who were really kind when they didn't have to be, and the people who stood up for me and the people who believed in me, not just my dad, but others. And that, I think, is a great story about what's really important in life and the power of love and the power of support and how that really makes a difference.
Well, that alone is an enormous message because, we hear about bullying and how to, what to do when your kid is bullied and so on and so forth. But you're right. As you look back on your life, those are painful memories, but they can be balanced and even outweighed by love and encouragement and attention, real love and encouragement and attention that other adults give you. And that alone is a message of hope, because I think as parents, it's so worried and we're so risk averse or pain averse for our kids that we want to protect them rather than say, okay, this is what's happened, but here's where I can step in and really tip the balance.
Yeah, look, and the principal at the private high school I graduated from told my dad the day I graduated, he said, there have been kids at this school, I think he'd been there for 25 years, who have had it worse than lucky in terms of the bullying, but nobody who made it.
Wow.
So it was awful. And, my sister, who's younger, remembers when she was a little girl walking me home and me crying every day, holding her hand. And she remembers that when I was in 12th grade and she was in 7th grade, she was known as the retarded kid sister. And people people bullied her because of me. So they had a big brother, little brother, big sister, little sister. So 12th graders sort of adopted a 7th grader. And no one in my class would be her big sister because of me. So that part was real. But you're right that my parents' continued statement that, what makes you popular in high school is not the currency of life.
No.
And drove that home over and over and over again. And interestingly enough, we have this story that when I was over in the Middle East, running with the rebels in Libya during the Libyan civil war, the most surprising thing in the world happened to me, which is I got an email from the father of one of the bullies telling me how proud everyone in St. Louis was of me. Yeah. So life changes.
Yeah.
And it's that message, and in telling kids that message over and over and over again makes a difference.
If you had been born without being on the spectrum, well, it's kind of would you have landed today where you are?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything different.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that I think the message of the book transcends the spectrum, right? To ADHD, to just kids having a hard time, to kids with physical disabilities, whatever it is, that the idea of really challenging kids and believing that they can be more than what their diagnosis is, and not just sort of rolling over and saying, well, we're going to just make life easy. And pushing and forcing them to do hard things, as my dad did, whether hard was going back to school after what teachers said to me or what happened to me or what kids did to me, or pushing me to do push-ups, or pushing me to get into rowing, and then really pushing that I set high goals and high standards and achieve them, and supporting me doing it. I think that transcends what the diagnosis is or what the difficulty a child is having. And it's a different message than I think what parents are hearing, even from experts, is what they should do.
Right. Exactly. That's a great place to end, because the experts are not telling parents the right things. And that's what I love about this, because parents are being told, nope, that's it. They are who they are. You can't change a person's brain. Accept this child for who he is. Just pad them and make life as easy for them as you can. And don't have any expectations for them. That's one of the things I see, is they pick up all of the slack. Rather than making a 13-year-old kid, like when you're a 13, say, hey, go do your laundry and take the sheets off your bed. And no, I'm not going to do that because he's special. Well, that's really, one of the worst things that can happen. But that's the way it is today. And so that's why this book is so counter cultural parenting, if you will. My guest today has been the extraordinary Leland Vittert. He is a reporter, a veteran journalist, and he has his new memoir, Born Lucky. Read the book. It's just incredible. And it would be really fun, Leland, to have your dad sometimes interview with you, particularly when you're in television, because then we can...
Good luck.
He wouldn't.
Yeah, I've interviewed failed suicide bombers. I've confronted presidents. I've interviewed terrorists. I've gotten a lot of people in my life to talk to me, and he says no. So
he says no. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he and I talked to write the book, and he said that he wants that to let it speak for itself. So I'm still working on it. I believe in my powers of persuasion to get that interview, but that'll be the toughest interview I've ever landed.
Yeah, that's just great. Well, what a blessed man you are to have had a family like that and a sister like that, and everybody who's stuck with you. But Leland, I know this book, Born Lucky, is going to be a massive bestseller, because it's just a book that everybody needs to read. So best of luck with that. If people want to find out more about your journey or anything, do you have a website you'd like to share?
Yeah, so bornluckybook.com. Obviously, you can order it on Amazon. You can order it on Barnes & Noble and everywhere like that. And then I'm on TV every night at 9 p.m. Eastern on News Nation. So you can watch me there. And then on social media at Leland Vittert.
There was so much to share. We had to break it into 2 events. I'm Dr. Meg, and in part 1, we uncovered the reality of kids' exposure to pornography. Now in part 2, what you can do will move from awareness to action. You'll learn how to start age-appropriate conversations, set healthy tech boundaries, and protect your kids online before the world does. Join me live for Protecting Your Kids from Pornography, Part 2. Register now at meekerparenting.com. That's meekerparenting.com.